database. Okay, so what is actually a database security? So database security is all about protecting your important data to keep it safe and when it's stored, whether it's called database management system. So the thing is, you want your data to be safe whenever you keep it, okay, when it stores in something called like DBMS. So what exactly does the database security do? So basically, it just protects any sensitive data like your personal information, files, records, or any confidential documents. And the security to make sure that only the right people can access to the right data. Okay, only the right people can access to the data. So no one else can do succeed, modify, can change, or even misuse the data. So by this kind of security, the user, the administrator, can prevent any damage or even corrupted data, whether it's totally accidentally or in purpose. Okay, so you may think like an hour ahead on a available cursor. If you put something valuable at your house, you may need to have a security system at your house. Okay, so you may have a higher level access of security that with the very high secure, something like that, so that no one can break into your house and no one can steal your valuable. Okay, so it's just like the basic idea of the database security. And why is the data security important? Because you know that when we're dealing with a database, we're dealing with people's information. Okay, people's information usually it tends to be a sensitive information. So that uh, it's very important because when you work for an organization, then the data is related to your customer information, and then your employee information, and then the financial data. And if this kind of data are exposed and lost, it can be a big problem for the organization. So the database security will help prevent this kind of harm to the data, whether it's done accidentally or unintentionally unpurposed. So an accidental harm would be someone making mistakes, okay, making a mistake while they're modifying the data. But when there is an intentionally harm to the database, it means that it could be hackers trying to steal the data in the database, or maybe it's not only to steal, maybe the hackers are trying to damage the data, wants to destroy the data. Okay, so this is like a very important thing when you are dealing with the database. Oops. Okay, so there are key concepts of the database security. It's include the access control, and the next one is called DAC. DAC, the discretization of the access control. So access control is like someone in front of the gate, in front of the security, okay? Oh, okay, no, 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 security. Maybe in the club, okay, as a bouncer in the club, the bouncer at the club will decide who can get into the club, okay? And what people that are allowed and what can they do inside, well, as they're inside. And database, we also do this kind of control. It's called access control, which is determining which users can view, which users can modify, and which users can delete the data. It uses something called privilege. Privilege is a permission. So permission to control what each user is allowed to do. So for example, like a report, they might only be able to view data, okay, to view data, but they cannot modify it, okay? And then the managers, okay, managers can view the data and also can modify the data. So this is the difference of the privilege, means permission or access control. And now the next one is called DAC. DAC is discretionary access control. So it's the common ways to manage control access in a database. And it works by giving the users some specific privilege to access or to modify certain parts of the database. And for example, if you make, the documents, okay, you can make, whether it's Word, Excel, spreadsheet, you can also manage who can modify, can view, can read, something like that, okay? And in database, we also can grant access to the person, okay? The person that we give the documents to. So in short, the access control is about managing about who can do what in a database. And then DAC is one of the most common methods to make sure that the only right people have the right permission to access to a database. All right, let's talk about the goals of the database security. So the main goal of the database security is to protect the data. Yeah, it's it's straightforward. When we want to make everything secure, then we need to, protect the data and then make sure that it stays real and to stays private by doing this kind of thing. And then protecting the data from some basic thing. The first is from protecting the data from an unauthorized access. It means that keeping the data safe from people who should not have the access to the data. Okay. For example, maybe doctors can see the patient's records, right? Uh, Only the doctors, the nurse can see the patient's record, medical history of the patients. So the nurse cannot have this kind of access to the uh, patient's records. And then the security, database security is also protecting data from any accidental or intentional loss. This means that preventing the data from being deleted or destroyed, whether by mistakes, okay, mistakes like maybe someone clicked the wrong button or on purpose. On purpose here means that someone like a hacker or side of the organization trying to break into the application, to the database, and try to cause any harm. with the database. Okay, so database security also tries to protect the data from the accidental or intentional loss in this case. And of course, database security also protects the data from misuse or corruption. So this means that stopping people from using the data in the wrong way, like maybe stealing the credit card information or messing up, like, altering the records so they're no longer accurate, something like that. And then ensure the data integrity and confidentiality. The integrity here means that making sure that the data is accurate and then consistent and trustworthy in this case. So, for example, if you update your address in the database, it should stay updated and not get changed to the previous one by someone else. Okay, it means by the integrated. And then confidentially here means that keep the sensitive data private and only let the right people to see it. Means by the confidential. So, for example, like your salary, your grades should not be visible for everyone, right? Okay, it means by the confidential. So the goals of the database security to keep the data safe, to keep the data accurate and private so that it can be trusted and it can be used properly. And then let's see the role of the database administrator. So database administrator here, that the one who is responsible to keep the database safe, to keep the database secure and running it smoothly. And here are the responsibilities, the database administrator responsibilities. First, the responsibilities of the DBA is to ensure the overall security of the database system. It means that the DBA ensure that database is protected from hackers, from unauthorized users, or any other threats. Okay. So in this case, the administrator, the DBA, they set up uh, something called like security measures to keep the data safe. Okay. And then another responsibilities from the database administrator is to identify the serious threats to the database. It means that the DBA is always on the lookout for something potential danger, like hackers trying to break in, or maybe viruses, or even mistakes that could potentially done by the someone essentially, and like a delete or from data, something like that. So the DBA, they acts like a detective, and they spot risk before they really happen. It could really happen. And then another responsibility from DBA is they develop the policies, the procedures, and controls to protect the data. The DBA is always, you know, creates the rules, create the rules and guidelines for how the database should be used and protected. And for example, they decide who can access the data and then what can do with it and how the backup should be made just in case something goes wrong. And then DBA also set up, the tools and systems like firewall to make sure that these kind of rules are followed by everyone. Okay, so DBA in this case is the person in charge of making sure that the database is always secure, always runs well, and it's protected from any other threats. So it's like a protector of the database. Okay, so let's talk about the dangers that can harm the database and how we can protect. Okay. First of all, we need to know the common threats that usually happen, and it's not very common habits for the database. First thing is called unauthorized access, whether it can be hackers or by the insiders. Okay, someone who should not have the access to the database, like the hackers or maybe the employee inside the organization, they try to steal, or even they try to change the data inside. So in this case, it's one of the common threats that usually happens in the database. And then the next one is related to the data corruption or the loss. This happens when the data gets messed up or corrupted or deleted. It's either by an accident or like software bug or maybe possible unpurposed, okay, like a virus or something like that. And for example, it's like a power outage happen while saving the data, it will cause the data to be unstable and corrupt, something like that. And then another threat possible for the database security is called misuse of the sensitive information. So this is when someone uses the data, in the wrong way, like stealing personal information to commit any other crime or fraud, and then maybe try to sell the company's information, company secrets to the competitors. It's also can happen. So there are some measures to protect this kind of happening, to prevent this kind of threats to happen. First, to implement the access control. Okay, so in this case, the administrator needs to set up rules to control who can access the database and what can do with the access. Okay, for example, in a manager in the company, they can view and they can modify the database. Okay, but the regular employee, they can only view it. They can only read the data. Okay, so it's access control. And then the next one is to use the encryptions and backups. So encryptions here means that scramble data is scrambled data so that even if someone steals it, they cannot read the data without a special key. Okay, it's called encryptions. And then also need backups. Backups here means the copies that data which is saved in another place, which is of course will be saved place. If the original data is lost, in this case, or maybe corrupted, we can still restore the backup data which is lost or connected from the backup point. And then another protection measures is regularly monitor and audit the database activities. This means that to keep an eye on what's happening in database. Maybe if someone tries to access the sensitive data, the system can lock it directly and then alert the administrator. Okay, so the regular updates will have to find and fix security weaknesses in case of this that is happening. So we can conclude that threats are the dangers I can't harm the database. And by using some protection measures, we can do, to prevent this kind of threats from happening. And there are some security mechanism. It's related to the methods of key tools to protect the database. So it's like security guards that keeps the database safe. Okay, so let's check one by one. Okay, the first mechanism is called authentication. So authentication here means to verify the user identity. So it's like checking the ID card before letting someone into a secure area. Okay, so in database, it's also like that. It's same one. The authentication ensure that users who are saying they are, okay, and to identify the user is the real person of the user itself. For example, maybe when you want to log into something like a website, you need a username, you need a password, or maybe in some cases, like website with a higher security level, they will ask for your fingerprint or the facial recognition. They use biometric to log something like that. And then without proper authentication, anyone else could pretend to be someone else and access the database. Okay, so that was the authentication. And the next one is authorization. Okay, so authorization here means to grant the access privilege. So once a user is authenticated, the authorization decides what they are allowed to do inside the database. So it's like a student. Okay, student might only allowed to view their grades, while teacher can edit the grade of the student. Okay, so this is done by assigning what is called a privilege or permissions to each of the users. Okay, and this kind of authorization is like giving someone a key to only a specific room, but not giving someone a key for the entire building. Okay, so it's called an authorization. The next mechanism is called an encryption. So encryption here means to protect the data in transit and at the rest. It's like, putting the data into a secret code so that only the authorized people can read the data. Okay. And the data in transit here means the information that is sent over networks, like when you log into a website, the encryptions will ensure that the hackers will not be able to read if they intercept the data. Okay. And the data at rest means that the information stored in the database, like the files or the hard drive, the encryption will protect if someone tries to steal the storage device. Okay. And the last mechanism of the security is the auditing. So auditing here means tracking the user activity. It's not keeping a security camera running to record everything that happens in the database. It tracks who access the database, what they did inside the database, and when they did it, something like that. So if someone tries to delete the important data, the system logs it so the administrator can know who is the person who just deleted the important data. Okay, just some like that. And then this kind of auditing activity will help to catch any suspicious activity and to ensure the accountability of the database. Okay, so this all security mechanism need to work together to make sure that the database is safe and only the right people can access to it. And if there's a suspicion that activity happens, it will be easily to investigate and will be easily to caught by the administrator. All right, so now let's check the violation of the security and the database. All right, so let's check what is a security violation. Let's check the descriptions of the security violation. Okay, so security violation here means that there are some unauthorized actions that happens in the database to harm the data inside. Okay, and this means that someone someone does something they're not supposed to do, like an access or making change the data or delete the data without permission. Okay, so think of it like someone tries to break in your house. So they will do like, stealing or damage what is inside the house, or maybe messing with the things inside. So this is the violation. Okay? And there are three types of this security violation. First one is called unauthorized verification. So this is when someone tries to change data inside the database without any permission. Okay. And then the next one is an authorized deletion. So it's like, someone trying to delete the data from the database without permission. And the next type of the security violation is unauthorized reading. So this is when someone access or read the data they're not supposed to see. Okay. For example, like hackers, they steal the credit card numbers, or maybe an employee try to look at, the confidential salary information of other employee. It's called an authorized reading, unauthorized reading. Okay. So another example is, maybe someone tries to read your diary without your permission, and you are not allowed that happens, right? So this is the same case with the database. And this kind of violation will cause serious problems, like maybe you're losing the important data, or breaching the trust, or even the legal issues when it's related to the privacy, right? And that's why database needs a very strong security measures to prevent this kind of violation. Okay, so how we can protect database from the security violation? We need to build a security measures at different levels, okay, multiple layers. So maybe think of it like a building with multiple layers of protection around the doors, the gate, okay, like in front of the cage we have security, and then after that we have security dogs. Okay, just in case there is an suspicious items bring by the people inside the building. That's called multiple levels security measures. Okay, and this kind of security measures at different levels will have to stop unauthorized access or any other security violations. And we need to enforce this kind of security at multiple levels. So it's like putting checkpoints at different stages to make sure that only the right people can access the data and only in the right way. Okay, let's check what are the multiple levels of the security system. The first one is database system level. And in database system level, we have access control. It's like, having a security guard at the door of the database who can decide who can enter and what can they do inside the database. So it only allows or restricts what users can do with the database. And this kind of control is managed by using the privilege or the permissions. It's kind of spatial rights given to the users. For example, some users might be able to read only the data, while others can also modify, can also edit the data, can add the data, or even can delete the data. Okay, so different permissions, different privilege. And I think I have told you before, it's the implement the DAC, the discretionary access control. It's like specific types of the access control, which is used in most of the databases. So access control is the general way we can decide which users can particular activity in the database. Okay. And then the next level is in the operating system level. Here we're talking about the importance of the security in the operating system where the database is running on. So imagine your database is like a treasure chest, and the operating system is the room where the chest is kept. Okay, so even the treasure chest, the database system has a strong security, has a strong locks key. It's not still safe if the room itself is not secure. Okay, so if the operating system is not secure, the hackers can break into the room, in this case, the operating system, and then the hackers will easily reach the database. Okay, so even if your database is secure enough, the security is very strong. It will not, it won't matter if the operating system security is weak. Okay, so we need to make operating system also secure in this case to make the database keep safe. And then the next level is called the network level. Okay, so the network itself needs to be secure because we need transfer the data sometimes through the networks, right? And like when we use the database, the data often travels over the networks, whether it's the local networks or the internet, the networks, the public internet. Okay, so when you are sending the database, you need to think that you are sending the valuable letter through the mail. And you need to make sure that it cannot be stolen. or it cannot be read by someone else along the way. So the network software needs to be very strong. They have a security features to protect the data. And there are two common ways to protect the data of networks through the firewall. First is firewall. It's like the security guard which decide which data that came in, that came out for a network. And then through encryptions. Encryptions here, like I said before, the scrambles data. Okay, the scrambles the data. So even if the data is stolen by someone else, the hackers, someone who steals it, cannot understand without the special key to encrypt the data. Okay. So protecting data while it's being transmitted over the network is just as important as protecting the database itself. Okay, now let's talk about how the human behavior can also affect the database security and what can we do to reduce the kind of mistakes. Okay, first, by reducing the human error. So this means we need to carefully assign authorizations to the users. This means that giving people only the access they need to do their jobs, nothing more, nothing less. So if someone only needs to view the data, don't give them permission to edit or to delete the file. So this is called the principle of the privilege. Okay. And then the second one, by training the employee to follow the security protocols. You know that people can accidentally cause the security problems if they don't know the rules, if they don't know how to, what is the product, what is the rules on how to do it. So, for example, they might use the weak password, and then they share the password with others, the login details with others, and by training the employees, they will understand how to use the database safely, and then how to avoid this kind of mistakes, which is could lead to the security breaches. Okay, for example, avoid giving unnecessary access to users. For instance, if an intern only need to read the reports, don't give them permission to delete the file or change any sensitive data. Okay, and this will reduce the risk of accidental or intentional harm to the database. And this is very important because, the humans sometimes is the weakest, the most weak link in the database security. Even like the small mistakes, like using a password, like, free password. It's also lead to the security breaches. Yeah, it will. It will lead to a big problem. So by doing this kind of activity, like training the employees and assign the authorizations to users, we can manage the access and training the employees. We can prevent many security issues before it actually happens. Okay, so the human factors plays a big role in database security. And then the physical security is about protecting the physical system. which is stored in the database. So it's like keeping the hardware safe, like servers, like computers, and any other equipment. So protecting the physical system here means that to secure the servers from three types of threats. Okay, from the three types of threats. First one is called theft or looting. Okay, theft or looting here means that protecting the hardware from being stolen. So maybe someone would break into the server room, into the office, and then take the server with them. So to prevent this kind of from happening, we use things like locked server, the locked key to lock the server key room, and then maybe having the security cameras and alert, just like keeping your valuable in safe. And then the next threat is a natural disaster. No one knows when the fire happens, when the flood happens, or maybe the earthquake will happen. No one knows. So this kind of natural disaster can destroy the physical system. Okay, and to protect against this kind of natural disaster, we use things like maybe fireproof and waterproof storage. So we can keep the database safe. Okay, and then we place the servers in a location that less likely to be affected by the disasters. And then the next one is the system failure. This is another threat also. So the hardware can also fail due to the power outage, the power outage, or maybe the overheating, or just wearing over a time. Okay, it's very old, so it will fail the system. So to prevent this kind of threat, we need to use a backup power system. It's like generators or UPS devices. And of course, to do a regular maintenance to keep the equipment in a good condition. So it's like having a spare tire in your car just in case it's flat. All right, 10 minutes break. We will continue after the 10 minutes break. Anyone needs roll call for the first hour? Which student ID? Yes. Which one? This one. This one? Okay.
No.
Which one? Which number? 249.
Yeah.
Okay. For the first hour?
Yeah.
Which student ID?
11144 263.
Two
This.
16. Okay.
Thank you, teacher.
Okay, so let's continue the physical security. You know that it's related to the hardware, like servers, and then computers and other equipment. And the examples will be the use of the locked server rooms, and then it's to stop unauthorized people from accessing the server rooms, and then the use of backup power system like generators to keep the servers running during the power outage. Okay. The next one, let's talk about the authorization. Okay, the authorization. Okay, what is authorization? So authorization is, granting the specific access rights to the users based on their roles. And authorization here is about deciding what users is allowed to do in the database. For example, like you, student, you might be only allowed to view your grades, but you cannot edit your grades, right? You cannot change, you cannot modify your grades. Your teachers can do the modifying activity. So it's like that, very specific access. And then it helps to maintain the database security by controlling the user actions. So by setting these access rights, we make sure that the users can only do what they're supposed to do. For example, like a cashier, they might be allowed to process the sales, but they cannot change the prices of the items. And this will prevent the accidents, like maybe someone deletes the important data by mistakes, and of course stop the malicious actions like the hackers maybe trying to steal or corrupting the data. And this authorization is very important because if you want the database safe, you need to ensure that each users need to access with the right data, with the particular data. Okay. And it follows the principles of the privilege where the users can only get access they need to do their job. So not more than that. Okay. And then there are some types of access rights. First is read access, the read access, where the users can only read or view the data in the database. They cannot change, they cannot modify, they cannot add anything, or even they cannot delete the data. Okay, they only can view the data. Okay, so it's like the student, you can see the grades, but you cannot modify the grade. Your teachers can do that. And then the update access. Update access here means that the users can update or modify the existing data in the database, but they cannot delete the data. Okay, or maybe they cannot add the new data. They can only update existing data. It's called update access. And then insert access. Insert access here means that the users can add the new data uh, to the database. However, they cannot modify or they cannot delete the existing data. Okay, so it's called an insert access. And the next type of access is delete access. So the users can delete the data from a database, but they cannot modify, they cannot update the existing data. So only the delete access, okay? They can delete the data. For example, an admin, okay, admin might delete the old records that are no longer used. So it's like an outdated customer information, something like that. And the next type of access is called index access. So the users in this case, they can create or they can delete indexes in the database. So you know the index here means the shortcut that helps the database to find the data faster. Okay, it's called index. And the one who can create this kind of index is called database developer. Yeah, database developer. They create this kind of index to speed up the search for the customer's name, for example. And then the next type of access is called alteration access. So alteration here means the users can add the new data or delete the attributes. Okay, sorry, it's not add the data, it's add or delete the attributes. The attributes here means the column in a database, in a table, sorry. So the alteration agents will allow the users to modify the structure of the table. And usually this is the database administrator who do this kind of things. They add new columns and then they store the email addresses to the new column of email. Or maybe they can delete the column of the table if it's needed. The next type of access is called resource access. So resource access gives the users can create the new tables in the database. Okay. And the tables like building blocks of the database, they store data in an organized way. And the developer of the database, they might create the new table to store new information about the new products, maybe, yeah, for example. And the next type of access is called the drop access. Okay, the drop access. So the drop access here, the users can delete the entire tables from the database. This is a very powerful action before because it removes not just the data inside the tables, but also the structures of the data. Okay, and usually the admin will do this kind of access. Okay, the admin might delete an old table that's no longer needed, like a table, storing updated inventory, records, something like that. So it's like throwing away the entire folder from of filing cabinets. It's include all the documents inside the file cabinet, right? The documents. Okay, and this permissions is very powerful, and the administrator needs to choose the trusted users to do this kind of activity and to do this kind of access. And if this kind of access misused, the permission will cause a serious problem. Because you know that the database, like the database that you just built, is connected to each other, right? The tables. So if someone misused the access to drop one of your table, that will cost you a big problem, right? You need to build from the beginning, from the scratch again, something like that. So the administrator need to, grant the access to the trusted user. Okay, so we watched that we have the delete access and we have the drop access, right? So this is the difference between these two. So delete access is more like deletes the data within the table. So the structures will be still there, stays the same. So for example, if you delete the student's records from the student's table, the student's data is gone. But the tables like the student's ID, the student's name, the grade, and many more still exist. The structure still exists. Maybe. So for access. It's more like you delete the data within the table. The structure still exists. So, for example, students table. This is a students table. I have a student ID and the student's name and then grade. So example one, four, two, so zero, zero, four, two, zero, eight. Okay, so I have these students table. That actually means that we only remove some, but I still keep the student tables in the database. But for the drop access, drop access. Drop access is delete this table. Okay, so you got a different one. Drop access there means to delete the papers, the data inside the table, and structure. Delete the structure table. So that is the difference between these two, the delete access and the drop access. Okay. Okay, so this is the examples I just talked to you. For the delete access, all the data is deleted. There is delete is removed, but the structure is still there. The structure here means that we still have the registration number, we still have the roll number, still have a name and class, but without the data inside. Okay, that was the delete access. For the drop access, that I delete everything here. One table, I delete everything inside all the records, or I delete or remove, and also the structure. The structure here means the registration number, the roll number, name, and class. So I delete everything, one table. Okay, so I left with nothing if I have this kind of drop access. Okay, so you know the difference, right? Okay, good. Now, let's check the role of the DBA in authorization. I think it's quite straightforward. The DBA, the administrator, is the one who responsible to assign an appropriate access rights to the users. And the administrator, the DBA, decides what each users can do in the database. For example, like you students, you only can view the grades, but you cannot modify it. The teacher can modify the grade. And then the DBA is also preventing unauthorized access to the database. They make sure that only the authorized users can access the database. And that blocks the hackers or someone else who should not have the access to access the database. Okay, so the database administrator is like a security guard who checks the IDs before letting anyone into a restricted area. And then DBA also ensure the data security through the proper authorization. So they set up some rules and systems like password and permissions and the encryptions to keep the database safe. So it's like a building strong fence around the house to protect it from the intruder, in this case, the hackers. All right, so let's check the views. Okay, views. What is related to the database security? So views here means a personalized model of the database for a specific users. You know, like the view is like a filtered version when the student can only see like the one that I just described previously. The the teacher might only can view the student's grade, but the students can view the students can view the grades, but the teachers can edit. So the view here is the one of the personalized model of the database for a specific users. And then the views allows the DBA to hide unnecessary data from the users. Because you know that some data is restricted to see by anyone else. So the DBA needs to hide it from the users that they don't need to see, or the users shouldn't have the access to see. And what are the benefits of this kind of views in the database? It's to simplify the system usage. So users only see the data they need to see. The views will filter out unnecessary information so the users can only see what they need to see, what's relevant to them. Okay. Maybe the examples, again, you as the students, they see, you see the grades, and then the teacher can see also grades for the entire class. So it's like giving someone a map that only shows the places they need to go, something like that, not the entire world. And it also helps to focus on the relevant information and optimize the resources. Okay, so by showing only the necessary data, the views will make it easier for users to find what they need without getting overwhelmed, without getting confused with a lot of data out there. So this will save time and save the computing resources because the database doesn't have to proceed or display the unnecessary data. And then another advantage or another benefits from the views model is to limit the user access. So the users can only access a specific part of the database. So views can act as a security layers where restricting the users to only view the data they're allowed to see. And then it also reduces the risk of the security violation. By limiting the access, the views help to prevent some unauthorized users from seeing or from modifying the sensitive data. And what are the roles of the views and security? To combine views and authorizations, we need view restricts what users can see. So views, like I just described previously, is like a filters that shows only relevant information for the users to see. Okay, and an authorized control what users can do. The authorizations decide what kind of actions the users can perform, like view, like edit, or delete the data, right? So as a result, a secure and efficient database system. Secure here means that the users can only see and do what they're supposed to do. And efficient here means that the users are not confused. They're not overwhelmed with the unnecessary data and will make the system easier to use. Now let's talk about how to grant the privilege. Okay. So what is granting privilege? The users can access users can share their access rights with others if the DBA allows it. So in some databases, users who have certain privilege, like to view or to edit the data, they can share this privilege with other users, but only if the database administrator allows it. Okay, so for examples, a manager, they want to give a team member access to view a project report. It's like, letting someone to borrow the key to a room, but only if the building owner says okay. Says okay, okay? And then um granting privilege means that the authorization path are created from the DBA to the users. So the privilege here means the privilege flow from the DBA who has full control down to the other users. And DBA is like the root of a tree, and the privileged branch out to different users based on their roles or needs. Okay, so let's check what is granting privilege using a picture for a better understanding. All right, so let's check. Let's see the user's file authorization path. Okay, so DBA, the database administrator, they gives delete access to the user two. Okay, and then the user two shares this access to the user four, and user four shared with the user five. Okay, and this creates a change of permission from the DBA to user five. Okay, that's the first authorization path. And the second authorization path is the DBA also gives the delete access directly to the user one, who then, here, still here. DBA give the delete access to the user one, and then user one also shares the delete access with the user file. Okay, so this creates the second path for user file to get the delete access. Okay, so the user file, they have two paths for the delete access. Okay, so this is a second path. If the DBA revokes the authority from the user one, and then the user file can still get the first path, okay, this one, to get the delete access. Okay, so it shows how the multiple authorization path can provide backup access if one path is removed. Okay. So if it's removed, then the user file still get the access from the first path. Okay. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of this kind of authorization path? Like in large place, in large company, DBA cannot handle everything alone. By granting the privileges, the DBA can share the workload with the other trusted users. Okay, for example, the DBA might give department manager access to certain of data, and then the manager can share the access with their team. And it will be much more easier to manage the database because the DBA doesn't have to assign everyone to manual, every user's manual. Okay. It will save more time and effort for the DBA, especially in large organizations with many users and complex databases. And the users can get the access quickly without waiting for the DBA to assign the permission. Okay, this is another example for the user authorization where the DBA give the access rights to the three users, user one, user two, and user three. And it means that these three users can now access the certain part of the database. Okay, and then the user two grants the authority to the user one, and then vice versa. Okay, vice versa. And user one also shares their access rights to user two. And then there's a revoking authority from the user two, just in case if the TBA revokes the access from user two, and then the user two will still have the access the data through user one. Then this happens because the user one still have the access and then share it with the user two. Okay, so this kind of granting privilege needs to be very careful done by the DBA because the DBA needs to ensure the proper control over the authorization path. The DBA needs to be carefully track how the privilege are shared among the users, and the DBA needs to monitor and to manage the revocation to prevent some unauthorized access. And when the DBA revokes the access from a users, they must ensure that the users doesn't still have the access to another path. All right, so let's talk about the notions of roles, means that proving the user's access. So what are roles? So roles here means that to group the users with similar access rights. Okay, so role is a way to group the users who need the same level of access to the database. For example, all teachers in the school might group into a teacher role, while all the students might be grouped into a student's role. Okay, and it will simplify the authorization management by assigning the rights into a groups instead of to individuals. Okay, it will easier, it will be faster to manage this kind of access rights, especially in large organizations like university. You can just groups the users into some roles like teachers role or students roles, and then each of the roles will have the same level of access. Okay, so that was the examples in a university. Now let's check in a company. Yeah. Okay, so in a marketing partner, this role includes the users who work in the marketing department, and they might need access to customers' data, to the sales reports, right? And then for the software development, this role will include the users who develop the software. And then for software testing panels, this includes the users who test the software. And the DBA will assign the rights to the groups. So instead of giving the access to each user individually, the DBA will assign the rights of the access to the roles of the groups. Yeah, for example, the DBA might give the marketing role access to customers' data, and then the software development role access to code repositories, and the software testing, the role access to testing tools, something like that. And the users will be able to add to a group automatically inherits its rights. When a user is added to a role, they will automatically get the access rights assigned to that role. Okay, for example, if there's a new employee joins the marketing teams, and then they will add to the marketing roles, they will automatically get the access to the customer's data or maybe any other data that this marketing department can have access to. This is very important to save time, to save efforts, because TBA may not only to manage the permissions for a new role, instead of hundreds of the individuals user, they only need to grant the permissions to a group of the roles. And this kind of group roles access will make it say consistent, because all the users that will have the same access rights. And for the DBA, it will make it easier to update the information. For example, in the marketing department, the roles to access to the sales will be limited. Then everyone in the marketing department will have limited access to the sales report, yeah, for example. And the benefits of using this role of the in a database is, yeah, of course, to ease the DBA's work, to ease the administrator's work. So instead of assigning access rights to each one of the users, the DBA can assign the rights to a role or group. And then to optimize the resources, it reduces the redundancy and to improve the efficiency. The roles eliminates the need to repeatedly assign the same permissions to the multiple users. And it will be easier and faster for the DBA to manage the access rights, especially in a large organizations with many users. And what are the disadvantages of this kind of roles access rights? It's related to the security risk. It's very difficult to track which users perform a specific transaction. When the users are grouped into roles, it can be harder to identify exactly who performed a specific actions in the database. And this may lead to accountability issues, because it's harder to track the individual actions. So the roles can make it difficult to hold a specific person, specific users accountable for their actions. So that's why we need this kind of audit trail. Okay, so audit trail here means the timestamp records of the system activities. So the audit trail is like a logbook, the logbook that records everything that happens in the database, along with the date, along with the time of the actions. And it tracks the user actions like the logins, the logoffs, and the comments. The audit trail will keep track of what users are doing on the database, and it will help to detect any security violation, any performance issues, and any application flaw. So the audit trail here, it's like a security camera for the database. Yeah, they help to identify the security violation, the performance issues, or any application flaws in the database. So the use of the audit trails is to track the data access, like the log file creation, the reading and updating, the deletion. So the audit trail keeps the records of who can access or modify the data in the database. And the audit trails also monitor the system resources. It means that track the printing, the copy, and any access unsuccessful access attempt. Okay, if maybe someone tries to access data they shouldn't have access, the audit trail will record the failed attempt. Okay, and then insurance and support. The use of the insurance for post-incident analysis or for real-time system monitoring. So the insurance means like the audit trails act like a safety net. If something goes wrong, like the security breaches or the data loss, the audit trail can be reviewed to figure out what happened and who was responsible for this kind of activity. And then it's also over the real-time monitoring. The audit trails can also be used to monitor the system in a real time to help to detect and to respond any issue that happened. So what are the advantages of the audit trails? Okay, so the users can help accountable for their actions. The audit trails keep the records of who did what in the database. So it will be easier to the administrator to ensure that every users are responsible for their actions and discourage the misuse of the system. And then it also helps to analyze system failures or errors. If something goes wrong, like a system crash or the data loss, the audit trail will be able to use to reconstruct what just happened. And this will help to identify the cause of the problems and then how to fix it. Another advantage of the audit trail is to identify unauthorized access attempt. You know that audit trails can detect when someone tries to access the data without permission. And this will help to identify and to stop the security breaches before it will happen. The last advantages of the audit trail is related to monitoring the critical systems in real time. It can be used to monitor the database as it's running and will allow the problems to fix quickly, keeping the systems running smoothly. And there are some types of the audit records. Like first is event-oriented logs. So it reports a lot of events with details like time, the user's ID, and the result. So it's like a diary, okay, that records everything which happenings in database. And it also tracks every keystroke and the system response. So the keystroke monitoring is like a video recording of every user type and how the system responds. It records every key pressed and every command entered. So every result displays all recorded in the keystroke monitoring. It also helps to detect the intruders and access the damage. And the audit reports will help to catch the hackers or any unauthorized users just in case someone will try to break into the system, and then the keystrokes will be recorded and helping the administrator to identify them. Okay, so how we review the audit trail. First is after the event. Okay, we analyze the trail post incident to understand what happened. Maybe when something goes wrong, just in case like security breach or a system error, the audit trail can be reviewed to figure out what happened. And then the periodic reviews when the regular check audits trails for unauthorized activities. So it could be reviewed on a regular basis, like weekly or monthly, to look for any sign for unauthorized access or suspicious activity. And then also in a real-time analysis where we can monitor the activities as they happen for the critical system. So for a very important system like banking or a healthcare database, the audit trails can be monitored in real time. Real time here means to watch the audit as being created to detect and respond to any issue immediately. Okay, so that was the chapter 4, talking about the database security and the authorization and how to prevent such a harm with the database. Do you have any question? Any question with the today's chapter material? You can access this material on the iLearning. It's chapter 4.